Miranda's like, great, you're here to do my stress test. And a stress test is a way to spot, again, if someone's about to have a heart attack. And women's heart attacks don't always show on an EKG, and the test they had already performed on her, and she's just begging for a stress test, which, with all the time they're spending and the doctors they're sending to her, it would not only save time and money to just give her the stress test, but this woman is telling you that she feels like she's on the verge of like full heart failure, and you just won't do that. So this other doctor finally arrives, and she says, okay, great. She gets up. She's like, let's go. And he's like, well, I am here for a consult, but I'm not going to do a stress test because I'm not a cardiologist. And her face kind of drops, and the character realizes it before I realize it, though I've been in these shoes before, so I should have. And he continues to say, I am a psychiatrist. And this is the most infuriating thing, because so many women have come in knowing something is wrong with them, sometimes even knowing what that something is, and their diagnosis and their treatment is delayed, sometimes in matters of heart attack by hours, even days, to the point where it's too late, or in matters of more overriding disease, years and years, to where if when they had come in asking for help, they had been treated right then, they could have been cured. But instead, like me, waiting on diagnosis and not being taken seriously and being told it's probably all in your head, you should probably see a therapist, honey. Then by the time they finally find someone to listen and believe them, it's too late. So I was so angry, but glad that they were showing this truth of what happens, where she's coming in with something very serious, something very real. They could have disproven her if they truly believed she was wrong by giving her a stress test. Instead, they sent her a psychiatrist, to a woman, a proven top surgeon, an award-winning surgeon who runs her own hospital, saying she knows she's having a heart attack, and they send her a psychiatrist. Now, I know some of you are probably like, but this is fiction. Yes, this is a fictional account, but I guarantee you there are women at just as successful, just as accomplished as this fictional character who have been in the same situation. And I know hundreds upon hundreds of women who have been in very similar situations. So they send her a psychiatrist, and he's, saying, well, I don't see your family here, so that must be it. And all these things that have nothing to do with her heart attack. And she's fighting again, and she's begging to get noticed. And she finally sends him off, and she calls two of her trusted doctors from her hospital. But of course, it's taking them a while to get there. And in the meantime, the woman next to her, who's kind of a witness to what's been happening and she's been having some conversation with, that woman goes into, I don't know what, she maybe had a major heart attack or a stroke or something, but she basically lost consciousness and started seizing. And even in the middle of her own heart attack, Miranda Bailey got up and was doing CPR and calling for help on this woman. And while doing so, she saves the woman's life. The woman starts breathing. Miranda backs up and collapses, now in a full-on heart attack. Her doctors from her hospital luckily had showed up just then, and they called for help. The same close-minded, white Yale graduate doctor comes back, and he's being yelled at, saying, she should have been helped hours ago. And he looks at Miranda, who now is in full heart attack, can't breathe, has a mask on her face, and says, well, Miranda, your EKG came back perfectly normal. And it just goes on. I don't want to take too long with this video, but it continues on with now the younger black doctor, who is a very, very renowned cardiosurgeon, basically saying you missed the signs, and him just ignoring her. And a few times where he takes Bailey in to kind of undo her blockage in surgery, and she's awake for this, and she's telling him, you know, this could have been avoided if you had just done the stress test. All those hours I waited, I lost heart muscle. And he basically just says, "You're welcome," as he's performing the surgery, because he's now performing the surgery on her that's saving the blockage. And not hearing a word that is said to him, and not seeing his own sexism and how that clouded his judgment, just completely so close-minded. And then that fails. It doesn't keep. Her heart has already been so damaged that she has to go in again. She's dying on the table. And this stupid white doctor, he says he's going to cut her open, rip open her whole chest, and do like a major heart surgery. And Maggie, who is top of her field heart surgeon, says, "Why wouldn't you just do this one where you just make a slit and you can go in this way?" And he kind of doesn't say anything, and she's like, "Oh, because you can't do it. Please give me privileges so I could do it." And he still is just looking at her like she's a crazy bee and refusing her. And it's so infuriating, because you're like, how can you not see how sexist you're being? These women are top of their field. This woman is dying because you didn't listen to her. And even after it's being proven that you were wrong, you still won't let this woman do a much better surgery to save her life and give her a much better time at recovery and a much better chance at living after the fact, because she's a woman, and probably because she's a woman of color. And it's so infuriating. And finally, Dr. Weber, who is the other doctor who came, who is a man of color as well, goes to him, and he knows, you know, well, this is how the game's got to be played with this sexist pig, and says, "Listen, my man, you and me, like, I know she's being rude right now, but she is pretty good at what she does, so if you just give her the privileges, you'll thank me later, and we'll laugh about this at our next golf game. It'll be my treat." And he's basically doing that like, "Yo, bro, crazy bitches, right? But let's just do this, and then we'll laugh about them later, and, you know, you'll find another way to believe you were totally in the right." And because it's a man talking to him, he then is like, "Okay, fine, let's go." And so this is just the epitome of really what my channel is about, is how many lives have been lost because the male doctors who are treating them didn't take the women seriously. And I do want to pause for a second and say that it's not just male doctors. I've had a ton of female doctors who are just as sexist, just as chauvinist as male doctors. It's not an intentional thing. Sometimes with the men it's an intentional thing. They do think women are below them. But with most men it's not intentional, it's unconscious. And so with the women that I've experienced this with, it's unconscious as well. We've just been taught as a society that women overreact, they're overdramatic. We have been taught that if we're complaining of something, it's probably 2% when we're saying it's 100%. You know what I mean? And so how many lives have been lost because women were not taken seriously about their health? How many people have suffered? How many countless women have suffered, like myself, because I went to my primary doctor for years and years. The first 10 years it was a man. The next 5 years it was a woman, to only be told that I was healthy as a horse and I should be perfectly happy. I went to the hospital one time having a full-on seizure, and the doctor told me the male head of neurology told me I needed to go to therapy more often because the seizure was just showing that I couldn't handle stress. And I have millions of more stories, but the point is, for me and so many other women, if those first few times I had been taken seriously, maybe the doctor couldn't figure it out and they send me somewhere else. Or maybe they actually don't go, oh, well, your basic blood panel came back, so you're healthy as a horse. You're just maybe like stressed or anxious or, blowing things out of proportion. If I had actually been taken at my word and at the signs, it wasn't just all internal. I had visual, like things like seizures and other things that should have been cues that something was wrong. Early treatment of Lyme disease can make all the difference. You can actually be cured if it's caught very early on, whereas if it's not, it proliferates throughout your body, gets into all your systems, and so far there is no cure, and there is not even really a set treatment that works for everyone. So instead, my life has been a struggle. I have lost my career, I have lost all my savings, and every day is another day to try and find the right treatment, and it's a roller coaster of thinking I found one and getting sicker. And because of all those doctors who wouldn't listen in the beginning. And I know there are millions of women around the world currently struggling with the same thing, and they didn't have to. And there are women of color, and there are transgender women, and there are cis women who go in with heart attack symptoms and are ignored. There are women who go in with heart attack symptoms and are sent home and told to take a Zambian, and they die because they weren't taken seriously. And even though there's so much research now to show that women's symptoms of a heart attack are different from men's symptoms, there are so many studies that say they will die if these symptoms are ignored. These doctors who are so stuck in the old ways, who are so close-minded, who don't look at new studies, they're still going off of the things they learned in medical school 10, 20, 30 years ago. And they are killing people. They are killing people, and they are also just giving people lifetime sentences to torture and disease. And it's not okay, and it needs to change. And I was so thankful to Shonda that she made this episode. And I know that probably most men who saw it, it will be in one ear and out the other. But I hope that it touched some hearts and opened some minds. And for those women as well, I hope if they are going into medical school or if they are out of medical school and they watch this episode, I hope it opens their eyes to know that this kind of stigma of the overreactive woman is not true. Women are actually better at handling pain and illness than men are. This is statistically proven. And yet, our pain is taken less seriously than men's pain when they go to the doctor and the hospital. Again, statistically true. And this does not vary much whether or not the doctor is a man or a woman. This needs to change. It is costing lives. And this goes back historically. There's something that women used to be labeled with called hysteria.